Today I want to talk about how ADHD shows up in women next to how it shows up in men, because much like other things, for example, heart attacks, the onset of a heart attack manifests very differently for a man than a woman, and ADHD is no different. So today we're going to talk about why your diagnosis, if you're late diagnosed with ADHD or you suspect you have it, might have been missed in your adolescence, how ADHD manifests in both men and women, the crossovers and the differences. And then I want to leave you with a couple of tips that you can utilize right now today that are ADHD friendly if you just found out that you have ADHD, or you're looking for some new tactics to use with a newer ADHD diagnosis, or if maybe you just suspect that you have ADHD because of social media platforms like TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. For anybody who doesn't know me, hello, my name is Sara Kelly. I'm an ADHD mindset coach, and I come out with videos every single week on everything ADHD and the isms that pair with having ADHD. If you're not already following my channel, I come out with educational mindset tips and concepts pertaining to ADHD every single week. All you need to do to never miss a video from me again is to hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications. Let's get into ADHD, what it looks like in men, and then we're going to talk about how ADHD shows up in women. And I'm hoping through this video that you're going to connect the dots on a little bit deeper level as to why you might have had your ADHD diagnosis missed until adulthood. ADHD in men is very much an external phenomenon. I had a cousin, he has since passed away, who had ADHD, and he was hyper, the class clown, the loud one, the vulgar one, the fun one, the difficult one to get along with. Everything about him was big, loud, and disruptive. Sweetest guy in the world, and I miss him dearly. But his ADHD was that stereotypical little boy who grew up to be a destructive teenager, going joyriding in my grandmother's car, almost getting himself blown up by a lawnmower when he was young because he was such a curious guy and always trying to live life on the edge. So the three massive differences that ADHD in boys and men shows up differently from females is hyperactivity, externalized behaviors, and risk-taking behavior, which is definitely the presentation of the hyperactive, impulsive form of ADHD. Hyperactivity is pretty self-explanatory. It can be talking faster, being louder, being obnoxious, speaking out of turn. Externalized behaviors can be being rambunctious in a classroom setting, more overt risk-taking behavior like driving fast cars or speeding, partying, and even doing extreme sports. It seems like the hyperactive guys are just more in tune with that outwardly risk-taking behavior. And it doesn't mean that women who have ADHD don't have all of these things, but with women, it's very much more an internal phenomenon with our ADHD, which between the lack of research at the time with regards to ADHD and the fact that it wasn't until the 90s that we even realized ADHD could be in adults, not just children, so many of us women were missed. The DSM-5 was written for boys. This is true also of autism. This is also true in the medical field. For example, the way a man has a heart attack and the symptoms that happen before the heart attack are very different from the symptoms a woman has when she's having a heart attack. Now, this is not a cardiologist channel, so I'm not going to get into the differences. You can Google that if it's something you're interested in. Today, we're just going to talk about ADHD. ADHD in women can manifest as inattentiveness. Were you that daydreamer in school? Were you that person who didn't pay attention? Or if you were hyper, you were maybe a little bit more of a chatty Cathy, speaking out of turn at times, but you weren't necessarily bouncing off the walls. This is very true for me. I do have combined ADHD, both inattentive and hyperactive, but a lot of my hyperactivity is in my impulsivity. We're going to talk about that in a second, as well as talking too much at times. I definitely had this you're too much energy that made made climbing the social hierarchy in school almost impossible for me. When it comes to ADHD and women and our impulsivity, it doesn't always manifest as us bouncing off the walls. It can be impulse shopping. It can be sexually driven behaviors. A lot of ADHD women, when compared to ADHD men, have more sexualized behaviors. And that's not saying that every ADHD woman is like this, but can. It can also manifest as binge eating out of boredom, specifically at night, which isn't good for us because we don't have time to burn these calories and we're not directing our boredom into something that's good for us. Binge eating is bad for us. The same with those wine o'clock moms. I used to be one. I would get my dopamine and shut off my brain by going and getting a bottle of wine. So impulsivity for women is not always highly outwardly destructive, but can absolutely be inwardly destructive. So with inattentive ADHD specifically, women might have difficulties focusing, sustaining attention, as well as organizing tasks. The second way that ADHD can show up in women is we tend to internalize our symptoms. Now, part of this is a way that we're socialized, and this is going to depend on where in the world you grew up and how your culture at home and in your community is. But for me, growing up in Canada by boomer parents, I was told that little girls should be seen and not heard. I was told that I should not be overly emotional. I was told that I should not be hyper. So climbing trees in a dress was not ladylike. I remember my grandfather was a recreational fisherman and I wanted nothing more than to go on the boat with him, but he would never take any of us girls fishing with him because him and the guys would want to go to the bathroom off the side of the boat, so it was no place for a woman. That is very much that silent generation and boomer generation mindset. Gender roles were a lot more prevalent while I was growing up than they are now. We're definitely moving in the right direction, and I would argue that we're still not there yet, but we're a lot more progressive when it comes to strict gender rules than we were back when I was growing up. Another way that ADHD can manifest in women who missed getting diagnosed is we rely heavily on coping mechanisms. Are you an ADHD woman who falls into perfectionism or who's really successful at work, but everything is falling apart at home? Your office, your job, your career is intact, but at home you have doom piles everywhere, a sink full of dishes, and your home is in a chaotic state. Coping mechanisms is putting on a mask to the world while inside you feel like you're falling apart. And this can even be true for women who are really successful in their careers. I have talked to so many women who have highly successful careers and they still feel like this imposter, like they're about to be caught. Like if somebody found out how they were feeling inside, they'd be dismissed from their careers or their jobs instantly. And to me, this is a form of both imposter syndrome and perfectionism. Now, if you do struggle with perfectionism, there is a video linked that goes over some of the tactics that I use for myself and my clients, recovering perfectionist here. So be sure to check out that video after in the description of this one. Women also have societal expectations, and I talked about this a little bit already. You know, they say in the patriarchy that men are the head of the family, but women are the glue. So we're expected to be more organized. We are expected to keep the home a certain way. And as coping mechanisms, a lot of times we completely overexert ourselves, and this can lead to ADHD burnout. We also tend to internalize our symptoms. I know before I was diagnosed with ADHD, I was terrified for quite a few years that I may have the beginning stages of Alzheimer's or dementia. There would be times where I would forget conversations, I would forget to do small things. And before I knew anything about ADHD, I thought, oh my goodness, I think I'm getting Alzheimer's or dementia. I'm forgetting all of these things and I don't want anyone to find out. And what is my life going to look like in 5 or 10 years? Is this something that I have? Is this something that's going to progress really, really quickly? It scared me to death. So that was me internalizing my symptoms and not sharing what I was going through for fear of what if it was true, and if that was validated that I was getting Alzheimer's or dementia, I'd have to face it and deal with it. So I swept it under the rug. So for me personally, when I did find out that I have ADHD, it was a huge relief because it meant that I didn't have dementia or Alzheimer's. Another reason the diagnosis is missed for so many women is because we're misdiagnosed and have coexisting conditions like anxiety and depression. I was diagnosed with social anxiety and depression for years. And the two most common comorbidities of having ADHD are anxiety and depression. So these coexisting conditions can absolutely overshadow our ADHD and lead us down the wrong path. Luckily, because of 2020 and COVID, which obviously was horrible, but the silver lining to COVID is that TikTok came out. And I have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with TikTok because there is a lot of misinformation on that app, and nobody should ever take medical advice from someone online, me included. Don't ever take any medical advice from me. This is my own perspective and research, but always talk to a doctor about anything with your health or mental health. But it was in 2020, the early stages, that I discovered that I have ADHD from starting to watch ADHD TikTok and seeing a lot of similarities between the creators on that app's lived experiences and skits and my own. These presentation differences and the lack of research into how ADHD manifests for women is why so many of us were misdiagnosed. Let me know in the comments if you have been officially diagnosed with ADHD, what your ADHD story is. I find it fascinating how all of us late diagnosed women came to find out that we either have ADHD or we strongly believe we have it. By the way, self-diagnosis is valid. There are places in the world where diagnosis can take a long time. There are also places in the world where culturally mental health is not something that is talked about enough. So if you believe you have ADHD, as far as I'm concerned, you do. You did the deep dive. And the only difference between someone who's not diagnosed with ADHD but believes they have it and someone who's formally diagnosed is access to medication and maybe some accommodations in certain work environments. But to me, self-diagnosis is completely valid. You're not going to spend hours and hours and hours watching videos on ADHD, reading books about it, and joining groups that discuss it unless you're resonating a lot with how ADHD has shown up for others and what you know about it. ADHD can affect a lot of things, specifically when it's undiagnosed and untreated. It can show up in our career and our education. Yes, there are a lot of women who have ADHD who did amazing in school until high school came along or college came along, and all of a sudden a lot more of the onus of responsibility was placed on the ADHD student. There's a lot of crossover too between ADHD, autism, and even giftedness. With ADHD, I feel like specifically for us women is we were good until we're not. For me, when COVID happened and I stopped seeing people, I was living alone at the time, that is when the walls really came crashing down for me. I was lonely. I had a massive change in my routine. I wasn't seeing people anymore. My anxiety and depression were completely exasperated. My motivation and my low mood made it difficult to get out of bed most days. And that's luckily when I found TikTok and then went to a psychiatrist and was finally diagnosed with ADHD. I've heard other women say that they didn't find out that they have ADHD until they got to college. Again, it's another big life change. Or became parents. It seems like women, because we inwardly bottle up our experience as ADHDers, we're really, really good until something big happens, and then it's like, boom. Hello, ADHD, here you are. For anybody who is in that phase of life that I'm in right now, going through perimenopause, or if you've already gotten over that hump and you're in menopause, ADHD during this time of our life is another big kaboom of holy smokes, this ADHD thing is making my life so much more difficult. My executive dysfunction, my low dopamine, my estrogen being all over the place than I ever remembered it being. Let me know if you are in that phase of life and how your ADHD is showing up for you. And I just made a video a few weeks ago all about ADHD and our cycle as women. I have that video pinned as well if you'd like to check that out later on. So now I want to leave you with 3 simple tips if you are brand new on this ADHD journey, or if you are just wanting to lean into your ADHD diagnosis, or you're feeling that you have ADHD a little bit more. The number one thing is self-compassion and grace. People with ADHD aren't lazy. In order to be lazy, you need to not care. The fact that we can be so overwhelmed that we find it hard to do something and we care so much, that's where the overwhelm comes from. So just debunking the whole laziness thing. If you have ADHD and you struggle with certain things, you're not stupid. You're not less than. There is nothing wrong with you. You have a neurotype that the world is not set up for. And unfortunately, that does make our life a lot harder. But giving yourself grace and compassion eliminates that extra layer of friction. If we have a healthy sense of self and a good self-esteem and we're kind to ourselves, now we're just dealing with the ADHD. So many of us as ADHDers have heard a ton of negative feedback throughout our adolescence, and some of us are still hearing it today. And carrying that negative weight on our self-esteem doesn't serve us, and it actually does get in the way of our motivation and gets in the way of our drive to, move that needle in the right direction, to go for that new job, to finish that course, or to start a family, or whatever your dreams are. A healthy sense of self is a number one thing that you can work on, that's free, that you don't need medication for if you have ADHD or you believe you have ADHD. I do happen to have a free masterclass that is a self-esteem masterclass. It goes over the 5 pillars to creating lasting change when you have ADHD or you suspect you have it. The link to that masterclass is in the description of this video. I can tell you from firsthand experience, from my own experience and the experience of my clients, that someone with ADHD who has a healthy sense of self is a force to be reckoned with. We are amazing at starting our own businesses. We are amazing in sales. We are hunters. We love getting our dopamine from doing new things. But when we have a lower self-esteem standing in the way, it really gets in the way of us showing up as our best authentic selves. So check out that link. I promise you, you will not regret it. The second thing that you can do if you believe you have ADHD, or if you have ADHD, is to learn about ADHD. Like and subscribe to this channel. I do a lot of research when I come out with videos like this. I don't just say things to hear my own voice. Follow How to ADHD, the YouTube channel. Read books. Listen to Women in ADHD podcast. Follow My Lady ADHD and a bunch of other really amazing ADHD creators. Just make sure that you are taking what a creator says with a grain of salt. So if you hear something, my advice to you is Google it. See if there's any teeth in what that person is telling you by doing your own research. I also love Attitude Magazine, an online publication. They have a wealth of information, all accurate, all evidence-based. My next tip is to tell the people in your life who you love and feel safe with about ADHD. This does 2 things. It creates empathy and validation from others when you are struggling with something that is related to your ADHD, and it helps you learn information just a little bit more. It's one thing to read a book or to listen to a podcast. It's another thing to talk about what you just read or just listened to. It ingrains it into our long-term memory so that you learn it even better. And my final tip is to find a tribe and or hire a coach or seek counseling. Make sure that you surround yourself with other ADHD women. And if you feel like you don't have a tribe of other ADHD women, I do have a Facebook group linked in the description of this video just for women who have ADHD or believe they have it. Check that link out. I'm also an ADHD coach. I'm a mindset coach specifically for ADHD, and I'm advancing my training specifically geared in ADHD coaching. I'm taking on new clients right now. Watch my mini masterclass. If it resonates with you and you like what you see, there's an opportunity to work with me, or you can just book a call with me. The link to my booking is also in the description of this video. And if you do go and get any sort of counseling, Google ADHD counselors or neurodivergent affirming counseling. Sometimes when we go to a counselor who doesn't understand ADHD, it can turn into a very ableist feeling experience. You need someone who understands your brain. You need someone who is not going to tell you to just try harder and to just use the calendars. Yes, that's advice that does work, but when it's presented in a way of, hey, just get organized, it's not that hard, it can be very ableist. Instead, you want to work with someone who understands your ADHD brain and isn't going to make you feel less than in sessions with them. It's really important to find coaches and counselors who understand ADHD because as human beings, we want to be validated. A lot of us have heard so many negative things about us in the past, and the last thing you want to do is get your wallet out with someone who's well-intentioned but not well-informed to make you feel less than. Thank you so much for watching this video. I enjoyed making it. I enjoyed doing the research for it. I absolutely love this stuff and love serving ADHD women. Again, if you're not already subscribed to my channel, subscribe, turn on your notifications, like this video so it gets pushed out to more ADHD people in the algorithm. And if you have someone in your life who doesn't quite understand ADHD and this video resonated with you, share it with them. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week in the next video.